You either go up with your people or you go down with your people. Have they done it for so long that there is a trust element here now that they just always come through? I'm getting ready for a big assignment, and so yesterday I sat down with my assistant, Linda Eggers, and I kind of shared with her what I needed her to do. In fact, she's doing it right now in her office because it's a large assignment for a group of business people that I'm going to meet with for the next 2 days. Last night, I don't know, probably 9:30, she's over at my home office, and we're going through it one more time, and she says, John, I not only have done what you've shown me, and she gives it to me, but then she said, I realized what you wanted to have accomplished with it, so she said, I did it this way. And she just took what I had given her to a whole new level. And I said, Linda, one more time, you just make me better than I am. One more time, Linda. One more time, as so many times. You've taken what I've given you, and you just made it better. And you're going to make me look so good, and you're going to allow me to help so many people because you are a key player on my inner circle, and you have proven value to me. Make inner circle commitments. Inner circle commitments such as, I'm going to have team leadership, and then I'm going to evaluate my team. Another inner circle commitment I want you to make is that you're going to develop your leadership team. Make that commitment. I'm going to develop the people around me. I'm going to make sure that my leadership team grows. And here's why. If you grow your inner circle, you'll grow your business. Grow your people, grow your company. It always works that way. That's the law of the inner circle. The people's capacity to achieve is determined by their leaders' willingness and ability to empower. Let me illustrate. Every year, I spend time with my nonprofit organization, Equip, traveling internationally. And as I travel to many countries, I teach thousands upon thousands of leaders. What I have noticed, especially in developing countries around the world, is I've noticed that the person in power, the person that has a leadership position, instead of empowering others, and instead of sharing with others, and instead of including others and developing a leadership team, the person in a leadership position, instead of raising up people, in developing countries most often, they try to push down people. Here's what I want you to understand as a leader. You either go up with your people or you go down with your people. And this idea of somehow, I'm going to protect my position, I'm going to push people down. What we don't realize is it eventually is our downfall also. So you ask yourself the question, I ask myself this question all the time. Again, when I travel and I see this happening in other countries, I ask myself, why is it that the leader insists on somehow being way above his or her people and always is trying to kind of keep everybody, I don't know, they have this kind of like, the best way I explain it, almost like a king of the hill mentality. And I got to be on top. Why is it that people fail to empower people and give them the energy and the permission and the environment that will help them to be growing and be great leaders themselves? I think there are several reasons we need to discuss quickly. One of the reasons I think we fail as leaders to empower others is insecurity. You show me an insecure leader and I'll show you somebody that will never empower anybody. In fact, let me tell you what's never happened. An insecure leader has never empowered anyone because they're too insecure. They're afraid that somebody else will get their job. What happens if I give somebody a little bit of empowerment and they do a better job than me? Whoa! And that insecurity constantly causes leaders to keep pushing people down. Let me just say this, and then I'll move on real quickly, because I'll start to show my bias, and I don't want to do that. One of the worst days of your life is to be in any organization where you have to follow an insecure leader. Trust me. It's like walking handcuffed through a landmine. It's only a matter of time till they'll blow you and them up together. Insecurity. Insecure leaders do not empower other people. Another reason I think we fail to empower others is a desire for job security. I do know people who, I don't think they're insecure, they just want to keep their job. They're saying, well, I don't know if I want to train and empower somebody, they may take my job away from me. Now, what I've always taught, especially in my inner circle, who I've taught all to be leaders, I've always told them it's their job to work themselves out of a job. My thing is equip and train people to take your job. And let me tell you something. If you equip somebody to take your job and you train them, here's the way this works. If you work your way out of a job, I'll give you another one. I've had key inner circle members that have had 7 or 8 positions in a period of maybe 13, 14 years with me. I mean, they've gone from this one to another because they train and empower, and then they've done that, so they don't need to run that, so they go over and run another area. I have a wonderful friend of mine who's been with me for over 20 years, Dan Ryland. Little of that man, I bet you he has worked himself out of at least a dozen jobs in 20 plus years of being with me. And what I say to my staff is, you work yourself out of a job, I'll give you another one. In fact, here's the way it works with me. If you can't work yourself out of a job, you're smart, aren't you? I'll take the one away from you. You'll lose the job if you can't train someone else to do the job. But I think sometimes we just don't want anybody else to take our job. Another reason I think we fail to empower people is a bad experience. In other words, I'll bet everyone in the studio, and I'll bet everyone listening to this leadership training tape, I'll bet every one of us have had a time where we've trained somebody. I mean, you've worked hard, you poured your life into them, you trained them, and then it turned out bad. They didn't do a good, they left the company, they left you, they hurt you, they backstabbed you, they did all kind of, how many of you have ever had a bad experience trying to train someone? Raise your hand. Oh yeah, 100% in the studio. How many of you are sitting beside that person today? Now see, you've learned. Now your hand doesn't go up anymore. You know better. You know better. Okay, now, a lot of times just a bad experience. I've had that happen to me. I can remember as a young leader taking a very promising young guy, younger than me. I was already in my 20s, so he was really young. And pouring my life into him for about 3 years, only to have him just mess up. And I remember I said to myself, I'm never going to do this again. I am never going to do this again. I'm done training people. In fact, I thought, when I hire people from now on, instead of pouring my life into them, I'm going to keep them at a distance. And for the next 6 months, when I brought a couple people on my staff, I kept them at a distance. And then one day I realized that if you don't allow a person to get close to you, and if you don't pour your life into them, the good news is they probably won't hurt you. But the bad news is they'll never help you. They'll never be able to come alongside of you and truly alliance and partner with you. But a bad experience. A lot of times we just have bad experiences. I'm never going to do that again. And so therefore, we fail to empower people. Number 4, ego. Just ego. Just the fact, hey, a lot of times we don't empower anybody because we want all the credit. Isn't that true? Yeah, we think, my goodness, if I empower this team, they're going to get some of the credit, and I'd like to have it all. Hello? Huh? Number 5, codependency. I think sometimes we are codependent with others. In other words, basically what we're saying is I need you and I want to keep you close to it. If I empower you, I might free you up to let you go. And I put in there, because it's a true statement, you can't lead people if you need people. Now, don't take that statement to the extreme. Don't go back and say, boy, I don't even like people. This is awesome. I have the first quality of being a great leader. No. If you need them, and the reason you can't lead them if you need them is if you truly need them in a codependent way, you'll never make the hard decisions because you need their approval too much. By the way, as I close out the law of empowerment, I just want to say to you that this has been a law that has been very important to me since I've turned 50 and now much older. I've come to the conclusion for me, now this is just for me, that my greatest joy and my greatest fulfillment is in adding value to others. And I can say at this stage of my life, Other people's success brings me more joy than my own success. And I don't mean that wrong, because I still like to hit the ball out of the park. And every once in a while I get the chance to hit the ball out of the park. But to train and teach someone else to do that, it's a greater joy. You know what? I kind of know what I can do. But when I pour my life into others and I see what they can do, it begins to compound as far as the return. It begins to, instead of to add, it begins to multiply. And so I kind of close this law by saying that I have found that adding value to people is very important to me. And I basically try to guide my life so that every day I can positively take people to another level. And I found 3 things about adding value to people that is just absolutely huge. And the first thing I found about adding value to people is this: that you can only add value to people if you truly value people. If I don't value you as a leader, I'll manipulate you instead of motivate you. And it's never right. So the only way that I can ever add value to you is truly value you. And secondly, I only can add value to people when I know and relate to what they value. I've got to know and relate to what they value, because I can't add value to them if I'm on a different page. I've got to know what their interests are and what their goals and mission and passion is. Those are important. So I can only add value to you if I know and relate to what you value. And thirdly, I can only add value to you and to others when I make myself more valuable. In other words, I've got to keep growing. Because if I don't keep growing, I cannot pass on to you what I'm learning, because you cannot give what you do not have. So how do I stretch you? By stretching myself first. How do I add value to you? By adding value to myself first. How do I grow you? By growing myself first. By making myself more valuable, then I can add value to you. And that's what the law of empowerment is all about. Taking people to a higher level than they would have ever gone on their own. But because you willed it and gave permission to it, you empower them. The law of reproduction is a cousin to the law of magnetism. Remember, the law of magnetism says who you are is who you attract. Now we're saying in the law of reproduction, it takes a leader to raise up a leader. Now, the law of magnetism is kind of like the front end. The law of magnetism says, here's how you draw potential leaders to you. The law of reproduction is the back end. The law of reproduction says, once you've drawn these potential leaders, here's how you develop these potential leaders. We're going to begin talking now, and as you go through the laws of leadership with me, one of the things you're going to realize is that as we get closer to the end of the laws, we get more into reproducing ourselves. The first laws deal with how do I develop myself and how do I become the person I should be, those kind of things. And then we begin to shift from me as a leader to how effective I am as a leader to reproduce other people within my life. Here's what I know. We teach what we know. We reproduce what we are. It takes a leader to know a leader. What I've observed is that leaders can pick out potential leaders better than non-leaders. Are you with me? Because they have an understanding of what it's like to be a leader. So it takes a leader to know a leader. Secondly, it takes a leader to show a leader. In other words, it takes a leader not only to be able to know one or define one, and so therefore the people that find potential leaders are leaders themselves, but it also takes one to model or to show or to be an example for another leader, because the greatest motivational principle in life is people do what people see. So if you're a leader, guess what? You can teach leadership to others. That's why it's impossible for non-leaders to raise up leaders. It's impossible for non-leaders to train leaders. A lot of times I'm asked the question that why is not leadership taught more in the educational, academic, college type of setting? And the reason I say that is because there aren't a lot of leaders there. And if you can teach a leadership course, but if you're not a leader, you can't reproduce leaders. It takes one to know one. It takes one to show one. And finally, it takes one to grow one. How do you grow potential leaders? By being one yourself. People do what people see. So in this law, I want to talk to you about reproducing leaders. I did a survey about 2 years ago that was very important. I was doing leadership conferences, and I asked leaders all over the country, I asked them this question. I said, what's the number one influence on your leadership life? In other words, if you could go back and say, I am a leader because, and fill out the blank, what would you say? 5% of the people that said, I am a leader because, said, I am a leader because of a crisis. In other words, something happened that somebody needed to lead, and they happened to be there, and because they had leadership intuitiveness, leadership leanings within them, they rose up, took the challenge, led, saw that they could lead, and pretty soon kind of became the leader of the pack. So about 5% said they became a leader because of a crisis. 10% said they became a leader because they had what they called natural leadership gifts. They had the leadership leanings that I'm talking about. Now here's what's interesting. 85% of the people that I talked to in the conference and did the survey with on how and why did you become a leader said, I became a leader because another leader put me under their wing and mentored me. In other words, they came into contact with another leader, which goes back to the law of reproduction, and the law of reproduction says it's an absolute fact that it takes a leader to reproduce a leader, it takes a leader to know a leader, it takes a leader to grow a leader, it takes a leader to show a leader, it takes all those things. Leaders beget leaders. Now, here's the question. If leaders beget leaders, then why is it that I have come to the conclusion that only about 5% of the leaders reproduce other leaders? Because I've watched this happen. I've seen leaders who never reproduce other leaders. What most leaders do is they just have followers. They lead and people follow. Why is it that so few leaders empower other leaders, reproduce other leaders, develop other leaders, raise people up higher than themselves? Well, there are several reasons. Number one is they're insecure. Again, insecurity keeps us from empowering people. Number two, they spend too much time with followers. They just spend way too much time with them. And a lot of times they spend time with them because, let me just stop here for a moment. You know what followers do versus lead? If you lead followers, they'll stroke your ego all the time. They'll tell you how good you are, and you'll believe that foolishness. You know what I mean? And they'll say, oh my, I couldn't make it without you, and oh, you believe all that, you know. And followers just stroke your ego all day. Leaders won't do that. Leaders are restless. They're saying, you know, you're doing a good job leading, but can we hurry it up a little bit more? And could we take on a bigger challenge? And when are we going to? I mean, leaders following leaders, their main goal isn't to thrill you. Their main goal is progress, success. They want to get to the top. Thirdly, this is so true. Followers are easier to find and lead than leaders. Boy, isn't that the truth? One of the reasons we have so many followers is because we like it, because followers just follow. I mean, you know, hut, 2, 3, 4, hut, 2, 3, 4. They just kind of get in line. You see, leaders, hey, they're hard to find. Oh, they're hard to find. They don't flock. Turkeys flock. Eagles don't flock. You've never gone outside and said, oh my goodness, I couldn't even see the sun today. There was just thousands of eagles just blocking the sun today. No. Eagles don't flock. Turkeys flock. They're hard to find. They're not only hard to find, they're hard to gather. When you find them, they're not waiting to join your team. One of the best advice I ever received in trying to recruit good people to my team was this advice. Find somebody that is already fulfilled in a job that they're doing with excellence and go after them. The person who wants a job, you don't want. The person who's looking for something is not the one you want. Hello. There's a reason why they're at the depot waiting for the train to come. Being available is not a qualification. So they're hard to find. When I say they're hard together, because when you ask a leader to join your team, they don't just say, "Oh, thank God, I've been waiting for a team to join." No, they ask questions. They say, "Where are you going? How long are you going to be there? What's it cost? Can I drive?" They're hard to find, they're hard together, and they're hard to keep because they're restless. But if you're not going somewhere, as soon as the train slows down, they're off. It's very important in being able to reproduce leaders, by the way, that you be able to find potential leaders, because your greatest odds of reproducing a leader is to finding a potential leader. Think about it for a moment. If you got two people in your organization, one's a potential leader, they've got some potential leadership gifts, and the other person has no leadership gifts. Wow, you want to spend your time with the person that has potential leadership gifts. So you have to know how to see them. You got to know how to find them. You see, when I go to the airport, there are two kinds of people that pick me up. If they don't know who I am and they have never seen me before, there are two kinds of people who pick me up at the airport. The first kind of person, they just take a piece of paper and they put my name on top of it. And they stand somewhere where you deplane. They're standing over there on the other side of the hallway, and they got my name in the air. And they're just hoping I see their name. And they just got, they're talking to their buddy. They got their name in the air. The other day I was in the airport. Somebody said they had a name in the air. I didn't see my name in the air. I passed them, went right on to the hotel without them. They panicked, called me an hour later. "Oh, you're here. Oh, thank God you're here." See, if all you do is stick a leader's name in the air and hope, you miss a lot of leaders. You see, if you have a picture of what a leader looks like, you can find potential leaders. If you can find potential leaders, you increase your odds of reproducing potential leaders. Number 4, sometimes we don't develop other leaders because they fail to recognize the value of developing leaders. They've never realized the compounding value that if you develop leaders, you grow your company, your profit, your bottom line is bigger. Everything wins when you have leaders in your organization. Number 5, leadership has been viewed many times as a competitive effort and not a cooperative one. So many times we've looked at people and thought of them as competitors. And you know where I think we got that? I don't know, this is just me, I think we got that from when we were kids. How many of you when you were kids played the game Follow the Leader? Boy, I played that game. And you know what the goal of the leader was? The goal of the leader was to do things that the followers couldn't do so that the leader could stay the leader. So I grew up in a culture that said, if you're really good, people will never be as good as you. And therefore, you get a lead. And so therefore, I protected leadership by being able to do things that others couldn't do. And I think it puts within us a competitive nature that we don't even understand. And as we grow up, we carry that over into even the corporate world in our life of saying, I still got to be able to do things that other people can't do, so I'll establish myself as the leader. When I hold leadership conferences many times, a leader of an organization will come up to me and they'll say, John, I've got this huge vision, got this big dream, just about to share it with my company, about to share it with my department. And they'll ask me the question, all the time they'll ask me this question, what do you think? Do you think that my people will buy into my dream? Whenever they ask me the question, I say, let me ask you a question. Have the people bought into you? Because if the people have bought into you as a leader, can I tell you something? There's good news. They'll buy into the dream. But if they haven't bought into you, can I tell you, they'll not buy into the dream. It's never happened where an organization has bought into the vision without buying into the visionary. So the first thing that you sell is not your dream. The first thing you sell is not the vision you have. The first thing you sell is yourself. Because when you can connect, goes back to the law of connection. When you can touch a heart, you can ask for the hand. In other words, when you can touch them relationally, when they have bought into you emotionally, when they like you, when you're at least on level number 2 on the 5 levels of leadership, when they have bought into you, then they'll buy into the dream. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to always sell yourself. And then you can sell your dream. But it's impossible to sell your dream if you haven't first sold yourself. You see, every vision is filtered through the messenger. So therefore, when I hear a vision or when I have a dream presented to me as a leader, it's an absolute fact that every one of those dreams and visions are filtered through who gives the dream and who shares the vision. I've often said it this way. The leader finds the dream and then the people. That's the way it works. As a leader, I have a vision or I dream, and I got this vision dream, and I say, okay, I've got to go find some people to fulfill it because I can't do it all myself because it's a bigger dream than I have. So the leader finds the dream and then the people. The people find the leader and then the dream. Most people go throughout life without the dream or the vision. So they have to find the leader that has a dream or a vision that's compatible with them. But in staying long enough to find out what the leader's dream is and what the vision of that leader is and where that leader is taking them, they also realize, I've got to buy into this person. I've got to like them. If I'm going to take a journey with them, I've got to relate to them. I've got to connect with them. They have to like me. They have to believe in me. They have to relate and connect with me. So the law of buy-in is absolutely huge because what we have to understand is that our job as a leader isn't to sell the dream first. Our job as a leader is to sell ourselves first. And with the selling of ourselves and the connecting with people, they connect with the dream. Again, how do I take the vision from me to we? The law of buy-in. If they buy into you, it will soon be their vision, not just your vision. You know, there are some questions, therefore, that I have to ask as a leader. The question is not only do I have a clear vision, the question that I need to ask is, do I love my people? Do I enjoy being around them? Do I have a good relationship with them? Do they love me? Do they enjoy being around me? Is it a good time when we're together? Because the leader, again, understands in the law of buy-in, there has to be the human connection before you can take them to a higher level. What I want to do to make this lesson real practical for you is I have what I call the buy-in process that I want to give you. I want to share with you what is the process that helps people buy into you as a leader and then buy into your vision. Here's where it starts. Number one, the people see the problem. In other words, there's a need that people sense and feel and understand, and they say, oh my goodness, we have a need or we have a problem. That's the first step to the buy-in process. There's just what I call the obvious need or the obvious problem. Step one. Step two, the leader sees the problem and the potential. Now that's what distinguishes the leader from the follower. The follower sees the problem. In fact, the follower is frustrated and basically has no answers and basically thinks that his or her hands are tied, and so they're frustrated with the problem, but the leader sees the problem, but the leader also sees the potential. That's what makes a leader. Remember, leaders are dealers in hope. Where most people see the dead-end street, they see more than the dead-end street. So, one is the obvious need that there's a problem. Secondly, there's a leader who sees not only the problem, but the potential. Third, the leader has a plan. Now, this plan usually is a vision, but it's a plan. They not only see the problem, but they've got a plan on how to fix it. And in seeing this problem and seeing this plan how to fix it, remember, now they are beginning to be what I call tangible dealers in hope. It's one thing just to get up and say, it's going to be a better day. It's another thing to get up and say, it's going to be a better day, and here's why, and lay out a plan. One statement gives people hope for the moment. The second statement energizes and empowers them for the long run. So, there's a problem that's obvious. There's a leader who sees the problem but also sees the potential. And that same leader, thirdly, develops a plan of how this problem can be solved. Number 4, the leader believes in the people. As we studied in the law of buy-in, that you have to buy into the people before you buy into the vision. And by the way, that's two ways. The people have to buy into the leader before they buy into the vision, and the leader has to buy into the people before he or she can get them to buy into the vision. There's a buy-in on both sides. So this leader not only sees the problem, sees the potential, has the plan, but has bought into the people, which brings us to step number 5. The leader believes in the future. Not only does the leader believe in the people, the leader believes in the future, and basically, again, has great expectation of what tomorrow will bring. And step number 6. The leader shares this belief with the people. In other words, the leader gathers people around and says, let me tell you what I think can happen. Here's the plan. Here's what I believe is going to happen. Which brings us to step number 7. The people believe in the leader's belief. I've seen this happen time and time again. The people believe in the leader's belief. Even before, quote, they get it, they've got it. They bought in emotionally to the leader, and so therefore as they bought emotionally into the leader, they began to buy into emotionally the leader's plan, the whole process. Now, when those 7 things happen, the 8th thing is absolutely automatic. The people buy in to the leader. They just buy into the leader. Now, sometimes this gets to the law of respect, because the law of buy-in is a cousin to the law of respect. They're similar laws. They're different. One is based on emotional understanding and relationships. That's the law of buy-in. The law of respect is based on credibility and the ability to produce. So they're different, but they're cousins. Now, here's what I know. I can remember I was a leader of an organization several years ago, of which I followed an excellent leader who had been in that position for 27 years. You talk about taking time before people gave you respect or buy-in. For the first year and a half, all I heard was how good the last leader was. And you know what? He was that good. Instead of being jealous or instead of trying to pull him in, I bought into his leadership and talked about how good of a leader he was and how valuable he was to the organization, but I just kept doing my job with excellence. And what I found was this. Almost 2 years later, I began to sense the law of buy-in. Now, nobody got up one day and said, oh, by the way, John, law number 14, the law of the buy-in. There was no such law back then. I hadn't written the book. But I knew they began to buy into me. I knew they began to buy into me because they started coming to me and asking for leadership counsel. They began to initiate questions. And they also began to initiate affirmation. They began to talk to me about how I was helping them and how they realized where the organization was, and now the organization was so much better. And all of a sudden I realized, when you truly have the law of buy-in as a leader, you don't need to ask the people. They'll start coming forth. And they'll start giving you that buy-in. You'll know it because the people will share. In other words, leaders have the ability to bring victory to the people. In your notes, I have this statement: victorious leaders find the alternative to winning unacceptable. So they find out what needs to be done to achieve victory. and then they go after it with everything at their disposal. Now, if you'll let me just use a sports illustration just for a second, a classic example of somebody that understood the law of victory was Michael Jordan. Just had the ability to bring the team to victory. And even when he went over to the Washington team in the NBA, a team that had been lowly, they almost made the playoffs. Why? Because anything less than victory is unacceptable to Michael Jordan. You show me a person, a leader that does this law well, and I'll show you a person that absolutely hates losing. As I've looked at the great leaders in history, they all excelled in this law. Whether it's in our country, George Washington, who absolutely is determined to allow our country to be free from British rule, and stakes his life in 6 years, never hardly goes home to stay out there with his soldiers as they are undermanned and underrated to make sure that they bring this victory home, and finally he does. Whether it's a George Washington or an Abraham Lincoln who knows that the bloodiest time in our history is going to be a civil war, but he's willing to go through those dark hours so that we can eventually take this injustice off of our African American and friends and bring us to a new day. All of the great leaders understand and bring forth the law of victory. Perhaps my favorite leader of all is the leader of England, Winston Churchill, during World War II, who absolutely refused to allow the Nazis to gain control of Europe. And in the darkest hours spoke great words of victory to his people. I love the statement I have in your notes about him. Winston Churchill asked the question, what is our aim? I answer in one word, victory. Victory at all costs, victory in spite of all terror, victory however long and hard the road may be, for without victory there is no survival. So, what does the law of victory look like? Let's put a picture on it so we can understand it. Let's make the law of victory tangible. First of all, leadership is responsible. You show me a leader that brings his or her team to victory, and I'll show you a leader that takes responsibility. They take responsibility when defeat happens. They say, look, it was my problem, I was the leader. So the first part or component of the law of victory in leadership is that the leader takes responsibility. No excuses. Boy, don't you know some people? Every time there's a problem, they got 17 reasons why it's not them. The second thing the law of victory looks like is losing is unacceptable. Losing is just not acceptable. Thirdly, passion is unquenchable. You show me a person in the law of victory, and I'll show you a person that is passionate about winning. Creativity is essential. Why? Because you're going to have to constantly be creative to work yourself out of messes to bring victory. Victory is not an escalator to the top. Quitting is unthinkable. They will not quit. Commitment is unquestionable. And because of those preceding things, victory is inevitable. That's just a fact. I'm very fortunate because I have people around me who understand this law very well. And in my inner circle, they really do understand the law of victory. David Sutherland, who's the president of Enjoy Stewardship Services, that's an organization that raises money for nonprofit organizations. David, I many times go to him and I say, David, of all the people I know, you are Mr. Law of Victory. You don't allow my team to lose. You don't allow my company to lose. You're going to make it happen. And I knew he was the Law of Victory when I brought him into my organization. It was very, very small. And it was right after Thanksgiving. I was over at the office one day and I saw his wife, Roxine, and I noticed Dave was gone. And I said, Roxine, where's Dave? Well, he said, you know, John, his goal was X amount of contracts this year, and he's 7 contracts short. So On Thanksgiving Day, he left and said, I hope to be home for Christmas. But I won't be home till I have the other 7 contracts. So Roxanne said, I'm not sure when he'll be home. But when he comes home, he'll have the contracts. He came home 2 days before Christmas. All 7 of them signed. You see, Dave's a leader that isn't going to allow the team to lose. He just is not going to allow the team to lose. Kevin Small, who's the president of Enjoy, we got ready to put together a major leadership simulcast all over America with some of the major players such as Jack Welch and Rudy Giuliani and that whole process. And I can remember the day that Kevin came to us and said, I want to do this simulcast. And my brother and I looked at him and said, well, it's going to take a lot of money and we're going to have to probably have a cash flow issue. And the only way we're going to let you do that is if you go out. And we threw out, we said, you're just going to have to get leaders like Jack Welch or Rudy Giuliani for us to do this simulcast because you're just going to have to make it so great that everybody's going to want to watch it. He disappeared. And I went to his assistant. I said, where's Kevin? She said, he went after Jack Welch and Rudy Giuliani. He said he would be back when he had him. 8 days later, he came back with signed contracts. Jack Welch, Rudy Giuliani, and an all-star team of linemen. You see, Kevin understands. He understands the law of victory. It's just a very simple law. It's a law that basically says, if you're a leader, you realize your responsibility isn't to get across the line first. Your responsibility is to take everybody that's on your team across the line. You see, the law of victory is not an individual award. The law of victory is not an individual trophy. It basically says because you got across the line and helped everybody else get across the line, you took everybody on your team to a higher level. The law of victory says, yes, you won, but so did all the players around you. The law of victory can probably be expressed best in the words of Bill Russell, who said after every basketball game with the Boston Celtics, which he led to many world championships, he said, after every game, I evaluate my game not based on how well I played. I evaluate my game on how well the players around me played because he said, my main job is to make them all just a little bit better. So the law of victory is not a single award for a single person doing a single job. No, no, no. You see, you're a leader. Leaders don't go to the top by themselves. Oh, they go to the top. But when they go to the top, they're like my friend Jim Winokur, who took 20 people to the top of Mount Everest. He said, the greatest joy is not getting there myself. Once I did it, I knew I could do it. Now the question is, can I bring victory to everybody else? That's the law of victory. You can solve problems so much easier than if you don't have momentum. So let's talk about it for a moment and grab hold of your notes for a moment and I'll walk you through some fill-in-the-blank stuff, then I want to do some teaching. First of all, many times the only difference between winning and losing is momentum. Let's understand what momentum will do for you. Just as the law of intuition gets a leader started quicker so that leader can win the race, the law of momentum sustains the victory longer. Momentum allows you to be successful for a longer period of time. An expression they use in the sports world, and you've all heard it, is when a team has got momentum, the sportscasters will say something about like they're playing over their heads. What's it mean when they say they're playing over their heads? What it really means is they've got momentum going for them. And when they got momentum going for them, things began to turn out great. And here's why. In your notes, momentum is the great exaggerator. In other words, momentum takes what is and exaggerates it. Stay with me in your notes. Momentum makes leaders look better than they are. That's why I call it a leader's best friend. In other words, think about it for a moment. Just stop for a moment. when you've got momentum, people think you're better than you really are. And isn't it fun to be a leader and have your people think you're really better than you really are? You know, and they're just saying, oh my goodness, what a leader. And you realize that you're not quite that good. Now, you don't want to stop the momentum and tell people that. But it's a great exaggeration. It makes the leader look better than he or she is. And momentum makes followers perform better than they are. It allows followers to perform more than that. So what you always want to do is you always want to have momentum, because momentum is the leader's best friend. Now let me just do the reverse for this for a moment. When you have no momentum, or you have negative momentum, remember Paul Harvey is the one who said, you can tell you're on the road to success. It's uphill all the way. So every once in a while I run to people and say, you know what? This is just great. It just seems like everything's coming automatically. Well, that means they're going downhill. And it's only a matter of time. Now, let me tell you something. When you lack momentum, just as positive momentum exaggerates things in a positive way, negative momentum exaggerates things in a negative way. So, no momentum makes leaders look worse than they are, and no momentum makes followers perform worse than they are. In other words, momentum is the great exaggerator. If you've got it, you look better than you really are. If you don't have it, you look worse than you really are. Now, what I want you to understand about momentum is this. With momentum, it takes less energy to solve problems.